Albert Camus and Friedrich Nietzsche are often mentioned in the same breath. Both rejected traditional religion. Both believed that the old moral frameworks of Europe had collapsed. Both asked how a human being should live when God is gone. But despite these similarities, their answers could not be more different. Nietzsche believed that the death of God was an opportunity for greatness. Camus believed it was a danger. Nietzsche saw the collapse of meaning as a chance for humanity to create new values, to rise above weakness, and to become something higher. Camus saw it as a moment of moral risk, a time when people might begin to justify cruelty in the name of strength. Both men lived in the shadow of nihilism, but they faced it from opposite sides. Nietzsche believed that suffering could be transformed into power. He believed that pain was not merely something to endure, but something to use. Through suffering, the strong could harden themselves, sharpen themselves, and become more than they were. Life, for Nietzsche, was a test of force. Camus did not deny suffering, but he rejected the idea that it ennobles. For him, suffering was not a ladder to greatness. It was simply something that happens to fragile human beings. It could not be justified, and it could not be redeemed by philosophy. This difference is fundamental. Nietzsche asked, "How can suffering make me stronger?" Camus asked, "How can we live without becoming cruel?" Nietzsche wanted to overcome humanity. Camus wanted to defend it. These two visions lead to radically different ideas about power, morality, and what it means to live well in a meaningless universe. This is the tension at the heart of their disagreement, and it still defines modern life. When Nietzsche declared that God was dead, he did not mean that a deity had literally vanished. He meant that the old sources of meaning, religion, tradition, moral absolutes, had lost their power. People no longer believed in them in the way they once did. This created a vacuum. Nietzsche saw this vacuum as an opportunity. Without God, humanity was no longer bound by inherited values. We were free to create our own. Nietzsche believed this freedom was dangerous but also necessary. Only through this crisis could humanity become something greater than it had been. Camus agreed that God was gone, but he did not celebrate. For Camus, the death of God left humanity alone in a silent universe. There was no higher meaning waiting to be discovered. There was no hidden purpose behind suffering. There was only life, temporary, fragile, and unjust. Nietzsche believed that this emptiness should be filled with new values. Camus believed that filling it was the mistake. Camus saw in Nietzsche's project the seeds of fanaticism. When people begin to invent new absolute values, they become willing to sacrifice others for them. History, Camus believed, had already shown the danger of this. Nietzsche wanted to replace God. Camus wanted to live without replacements. This is the core of their disagreement. For Nietzsche, strength was the highest value. Not physical strength alone, but the strength to impose one's will on the world. He admired individuals who could rise above the herd, who could create their own values, who could shape their lives as works of art. He believed that weakness was the enemy of life. Camus rejected this framework entirely. Camus believed that dignity mattered more than strength. A person did not need to dominate or transcend others to be worthy. They only needed to be treated as human. Where Nietzsche saw suffering as a challenge to be mastered, Camus saw suffering as something that demanded solidarity. Where Nietzsche admired those who rose above others, Camus admired those who refused to abandon them. Nietzsche's hero was the overman. Camus' hero was the doctor who keeps working, even when he knows he will fail. Nietzsche wanted to create something higher than humanity. Camus wanted to protect humanity from being crushed. This is not a minor difference. It changes how you think about power, justice, and what kind of world you want to live in. Nietzsche did not openly advocate cruelty, but his philosophy made room for it. If life is a struggle for power, then some must be strong and others must be weak. If greatness requires overcoming, then someone must be overcome. This logic has haunted modern history. Camus saw where it led. He had lived through fascism, war, and ideological terror. He had seen how people used grand visions of greatness to justify destruction. He believed that any philosophy that places power above human life becomes dangerous, no matter how beautiful its language. For Camus, the problem was not ambition, it was indifference to suffering. Nietzsche believed that life is fundamentally conflict. Camus believed that life is fundamentally vulnerable. If you begin with conflict, you justify struggle. If you begin with vulnerability, you protect limits. This is why Camus rejected philosophies that glorified force. He believed that when power becomes the highest value, dignity becomes expendable. Nietzsche wanted to transcend morality. Camus wanted to remain faithful to it. One of the deepest differences between Camus and Nietzsche lies in how they understand suffering. Nietzsche believed that suffering was not merely unavoidable, it was necessary. In his view, pain was what forged strength. It was the fire through which greatness was created. Those who could endure suffering without breaking, who could even transform it into power, were superior. They became harder, clearer, more capable of shaping their own destiny. Suffering, for Nietzsche, was a kind of training. Camus could not accept this. Camus believed that suffering does not make people better. It makes them hurt. Sometimes it makes them wiser. Sometimes it makes them cruel. Sometimes it makes them numb. But it has no inherent nobility. To treat suffering as a tool for greatness is, in Camus' eyes, to forget the people who are being crushed by it. Nietzsche looked at suffering and asked, "How can this make me stronger?" Camus looked at suffering and asked, "How can we keep this from destroying people?" These questions lead to completely different moral worlds. Nietzsche admired the individual who could rise above pain. Camus admired the person who refused to let pain justify cruelty. For Nietzsche, tragedy was the price of greatness. For Camus, tragedy was something that demanded care. This is why Camus could never accept a philosophy that glorified hardship. He believed that most suffering in the world is not heroic. It is meaningless, undeserved, and devastating. To turn it into a virtue is to insult those who endure it. Camus did not want to conquer suffering, he wanted to resist it. And in that resistance, he found something Nietzsche's philosophy could not provide: compassion. Nietzsche believed that true freedom meant breaking away from inherited values. To be free was to become the author of your own life, to create yourself according to your own will. He admired individuals who could step outside morality and reshape the world in their image. Camus saw this kind of freedom as dangerous. For Camus, freedom was not the absence of limits, it was the acceptance of responsibility. When you are free, what you do to others matters more, not less. Without God, without destiny, without a moral law written into the universe, every action leaves a permanent mark. Nietzsche's freedom was creative. Camus' freedom was ethical. Nietzsche wanted to transcend guilt. Camus believed guilt was part of being human. This is another fundamental divide. Nietzsche celebrated the individual who could stand above the crowd. Camus believed that no one stands above others without standing on them. To be free is not to dominate. It is to refuse domination by others or by yourself. Camus's idea of freedom is modest, but it is grounded in real life. You are free to choose how you treat others. You are free to refuse cruelty. You are free to remain faithful to human dignity even when nothing demands it. This freedom does not create greatness. It creates decency. And for Camus, that was more important. Nietzsche's philosophy is built around the idea of greatness. He believed humanity should strive to become more than it is, stronger, more creative, more fearless. The ideal figure in his thought is the one who rises above the crowd, who refuses to be bound by conventional morality, and who shapes their own destiny through sheer will. Camus could not follow him there. Camus did not believe that greatness was the point of being human. He believed that being human was the point. Where Nietzsche admired towering individuals who stand alone, Camus admired those who stay with others. His heroes are not conquerors, visionaries, or world changers. They are doctors, journalists, volunteers, and ordinary people who refuse to abandon those who suffer. Nietzsche's hero says, "I will become what I am." Camus' hero says, "I will not let this destroy us." This difference runs deep. Nietzsche wanted humanity to overcome itself. Camus wanted humanity not to betray itself. Nietzsche saw humility as weakness. Camus saw humility as the foundation of ethics. To admit that you are fragile, that you can be hurt, that you need others, this is not failure for Camus. It is the truth of being alive. A philosophy that ignores this truth will always drift toward cruelty, because it treats people as obstacles rather than as lives. Camus believed that the true measure of greatness is not how far above others you rise, but how faithfully you remain human when the world gives you reasons not to. Greatness for Camus is not heroic. It is loyal, loyal to suffering, loyal to limits, loyal to the fact that no one is expendable. That is why Camus could never accept Nietzsche's vision. It was too willing to sacrifice the weak in order to praise the strong. And Camus believed that the moment you sacrifice one human being for an idea, you have already lost what you were trying to protect. Nietzsche believed that life is driven by the will to power, the impulse to expand, dominate, create, and impose oneself on the world. This force for him was not evil. It was the engine of all growth and creativity. Without it, life would stagnate. Camus saw something different. Camus believed that when power becomes the central value, it inevitably turns against human dignity. The will to power does not stop when it creates art or philosophy. It continues into politics, relationships, and institutions. It seeks control, it seeks victory, it seeks superiority. Revolt for Camus was the opposite of this. Revolt is not the desire to dominate. It is the refusal to be dominated. Nietzsche wanted to shape the world through strength. Camus wanted to defend people from being crushed by it. This is why Camus believed revolt must always contain limits. You revolt not to rule, but to resist. You do not seek to become master. You seek to remain human. The will to power asks, "How far can I go?" Revolt asks, "What must not be done?" This is the ethical heart of Camus' philosophy. He did not want a world full of conquerors. He wanted a world with fewer victims. Both Camus and Nietzsche stood at the edge of nihilism, but they looked into it and saw very different things. Nietzsche believed nihilism was a sickness, a loss of faith in life itself. When people stop believing that existence has value, they become passive, resentful, and small. He feared a world where people no longer strive, no longer create, no longer dare. To Nietzsche, nihilism was something to overcome. Camus believed nihilism was something to face. He did not think the absence of meaning was a disease. He thought it was the truth. The universe does not provide answers. It does not justify suffering. It does not guarantee justice. For Camus, this was not a tragedy. It was a condition. The danger was not that life had no meaning. The danger was pretending that it did. Nietzsche tried to cure nihilism by inventing new values. Camus refused to invent anything. Camus believed that once you create artificial meanings, you become willing to sacrifice people for them. History had already shown what happens when human beings serve ideas instead of one another. Nihilism for Camus was not an abyss to escape. It was a reality to remain awake inside. And in that wakefulness, he believed, dignity could still exist. Nietzsche believed that to truly affirm life, you must be able to say yes to everything that happens, even suffering, even cruelty, even injustice. His idea of eternal recurrence asks whether you could will your life, exactly as it is, to repeat forever. If you can say yes to that, you have truly embraced existence. Camus could not accept this. For Camus, to say yes to everything is to betray the innocent. If you affirm all of reality, you also affirm torture, war, and the crushing of the weak. Camus believed that a philosophy that cannot say no is morally empty. Life, for Camus, is not something to be affirmed wholesale. It is something to be defended. Nietzsche's affirmation is heroic and terrible at the same time. It demands that you love the world even when it is brutal. Camus believed this kind of love erases victims. It turns suffering into something sacred. Camus' affirmation is quieter. He does not say yes to everything. He says yes to human beings, to the wounded, to the fragile, to those who are crushed by forces they did not choose. This is where Camus draws the line that Nietzsche does not. You do not affirm the world as it is. You revolt against what makes it cruel while remaining faithful to what makes it human. Nietzsche wanted a love of fate. Camus wanted a love of people. This is the difference between a philosophy of greatness and a philosophy of care. Albert Camus and Friedrich Nietzsche both believed that modern humanity was facing a crisis of meaning. But the courage they demanded in response to that crisis was very different. Nietzsche's courage is the courage to stand alone. Camus' courage is the courage to stand with others. Nietzsche admired those who could endure isolation, misunderstanding, and hostility in order to become something greater than themselves. His hero is the one who dares to be different, who refuses the herd, who creates values where none existed before. This is a lonely, often painful form of courage, but Nietzsche believed it was the price of greatness. Camus did not deny that kind of bravery. He simply did not think it was enough. For Camus, the greatest courage is not self-creation, but fidelity. Fidelity to the fact that other people suffer. It takes courage to keep caring when the world gives you no reason to. It takes courage to refuse cruelty when it would be easier to become hard. It takes courage to remain human in a universe that does not reward it. Nietzsche's courage climbs. Camus' courage holds. One seeks to rise above the world. The other seeks to prevent the world from crushing those inside it. This difference shapes everything that follows from their philosophies, from how they view politics to how they view love, to how they view suffering. Nietzsche asks, how far can a human being go? Camus asks, how much can a human being endure without becoming inhuman? That question, Camus believed, is the true measure of courage. Albert Camus and Friedrich Nietzsche both stared into a universe without God. Both saw that the old sources of meaning had collapsed, but what they saw there led them in opposite directions. Nietzsche saw an invitation to greatness. Camus saw a demand for care. Nietzsche wanted humanity to rise above itself. Camus wanted humanity not to destroy itself. One trusted strength, the other trusted limits. Nietzsche believed that suffering could be transformed into power. Camus believed that suffering must be resisted so that it does not turn us into monsters. Nietzsche sought a higher type of human being. Camus sought a more faithful one. This is why their philosophies still matter today. In a world obsessed with success, power, and self-creation, Nietzsche speaks to our ambition. In a world full of injustice, violence, and indifference, Camus speaks to our conscience. You do not have to choose one or the other, but you must understand the difference. One asks how high you can rise, the other asks how many you will leave behind. And in that question, the moral future of the modern world is still being decided.